GM Farcaster. It is Tuesday, May 28th, and you are here with Nounish, Prof, and Adrienne and a few friends to help us digest and understand new decentralized channels. I have with us JTGI, Johnny Mac, aka Nonlinear, and Alex J. Como from Airstack. I have to say your full name, including the middle initial. It just doesn't.
No, we took out the middle initial last week.
Yeah, it's officially
okay.
It's Alex.
That's Alex Como now. All right, now I have to take out the. I just got trained. I just got trained, and now I got to retrain myself. So we recently had a change to channels, and we're going to talk through what that means. And one of the I saw a cast that went out, and Adrienne replied to it that I wanted to share real quick. And that is this one from Nixo, who came back to her channel after having no idea what was going on and had no idea what to do. So I no longer know how to moderate Farcaster channels. I'm trying to hide things in eStaker with the new Automod bot system, but they don't seem to actually be hidden. Apologies for the current spam. I need to figure out how this new flow. And Adrienne, your reply was many such cases. Shout out Ted and Nonlinear. Fear not. People are mostly being patient, understanding during this first change to channels, channel hosting is going from moderation to curation. Nounish, Prof, and I are going to cover the channel curation options on our show Tuesday, and here we are. So, John, if you want to start us off a little bit, can you explain what has changed with channels, and then what are we doing now with all these different moderation tools? And we'll just start there with first, like what happened with channels, what is decentralized channels, and why the need for the change? So I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, well, I think we're familiar with the old world. We had trending and another feed, and this was all moderable inside of Warpcast. We had, if you were a co-host, you could hide things. And now what they've changed to is two feeds, one recent that is everything and anything. You cannot moderate it. And another one called main. If that's set with a moderator, then if a moderator likes something from recent, it'll show up there. And if it doesn't, it won't. If moderation mode is off, there's no moderator set, then it will be default priority mode in Warpcast. So priority mode is people you follow will be prioritized in that feed. And then after that, power badges and so on. So that's the very high level, the changes. And I guess one other note that's maybe a little bit less known, the main feed is actually sorted based on likes. It's kind of like the trending feed, but in main, even if you have moderation mode on. So it's actually like weighted, the sorting. It's not chronological. So I think very high level, that's the changes.
Okay. There we have it. So if we turn moderation mode on, so if we turn it off, we have these two modes automatically. If we turn moderation mode on, what happens then? What are our options? And if we can talk through maybe both Automod and Airstack, and then we'll throw it over to Johnny to talk about sort of implementations of that he's seen. So if you can talk first about, so we turn on moderation, and what do we do, John?
So you turn on moderation, and you go into your channel settings, and you'll see a moderation settings as long as you're using desktop, and then you set a moderator FID or FID, sorry. And let's say you were going to use Automod, you would set Automod as the moderator, and then you go into Automod and set rules for things that you would prefer to be in the main feed. So in Automod's case, you would say, here are all the things I don't want to show up in main. Everything else will be included by default. And you can also, because co-hosts are gone with Automod, you can also set up a moderation team again. So you could say, I want my 3 co-hosts back. And all co-hosts can use cast actions to manually also curate the feed from recent and bring that back into main. And a lot of other things. But at high level, you're setting a moderator FID and then setting up your configuration in Automod.
So okay. I could maybe comment a little bit on like why it's like that, as like Dan kind of mentioned in the Notion doc that he circulated, which is with channels going on chain, there's a lot of things that you can't do. So like up to this point, like the way Warpcast is built, or I should say like Merkle is building, is that they have the Farcaster protocol, and then they have Warpcast, which is the client. And they're kind of using Warpcast as like this canary in the coal mine to see like, okay, what is working and what is not working. And then once they have high conviction on the answer to that question, they'll codify what is working into the protocol. And then now, so like the past, year, they're like, okay, channels are working. Channels are a thing. Channels should go in the protocol. Okay, but now we have to kind of untangle this like rat's nest of like, when we say channel, what exactly are we talking about? Because there's some things that are Warpcast specific, and there's some things that when you think about how to like represent, how to codify a channel on chain, there's some things that you can't do. And so hiding is one of those.
Right.
Boosting, there's like all this Warpcast specific stuff that you, I guess in theory, could put in the protocol, but it would make channels, it would certainly make V1 of the channels like much more complicated. So the trade-off that they made, which I personally think is the right trade-off, is they said, we're going to make channels like ultra simple, like very, very simple, like design on chain. So they do that. And then everyone is like, well, what about all this stuff that I could do that I've been doing in Warpcast? And Dan's answer is like, use Automod. Automod, you can add co-hosts, you can hide stuff, you can curate stuff, you can have all this complex rule logic, like go use Automod. And so like, I guess just some context on like why these changes have occurred.
And
Hey,
and
Connie.
with, I think the big one has been removing ban and hide has been, from the native Warpcast channel. You can still do some of that, I understand, from the moderation tools.
You can do all of it.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
So you basically have feature parity between what you could have previously done in Warpcast and what you can do in Automod today.
Okay.
And how you do that, and this happened super fast, which just I'm a like, I mean, I don't know. I think they kind of just took a rip the Band-Aid off approach. Which is whatever you can debate.
Except it wasn't a Band-Aid. It was like surgical wrap.
It was like the stitches. Yeah.
It was like,
I think it's a fair criticism because that Thursday I was up till like 3 a.m. that previous Wednesday, like trying to get everything ready, and then
I didn't sleep that night.
Yeah, neither did I. And like everything broke.
I was going to say, all of you have been pretty much awake since then. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Thursday when it launched, I was like, everything just completely broke. So like, the way that I figured this out, and like,
that's expected.
Huge credit to John for doing this. But the way that you perform these actions in Warpcast using Automod is by installing cast actions. So because I am the curator of the memes channel and I have specified Automod as the moderator, I can install Automod cast actions. And those cast actions are like hide, curate, cool down. There's like two more. I think John, you have like 5. You can speak to that.
Yeah.
But basically like, this is how you configure Automod cast actions and Warpcast today to get what was you previously got for free in Warpcast, if that makes sense.
free, right, and easy too because it was in the client.
It was
layer.
just there.
I just want to ask a few things. So, Johnny, I appreciate kind of the context, just because the reason we have all you guys here is because you're building this tooling, right? And that kind of how you talked about it was everything channel related before was Merkle generated. So all easy. Now it's kind of, and by the way, we're not decentralized yet, right? This is kind of, right?
This
I believe
phase
not
one.
Step on.
phase one,
Yeah.
So not fully there, but kind of how do we simplify, pare down only what goes in the protocol and then push all those other features out of Merkle, out of the protocol into third-party ecosystem. Just Johnny, when you were saying on-chain, I just want to, for my own, it's not really on-chain though, right? This like, is it protocol hub?
There's two, channels will, exist. They'll kind of have one foot on hub and 1 foot on chain. So there is an on-chain representation of channels.
Oh, gotcha.
It's in terms of the footprint, it's extremely small.
Like an FID type
Yeah.
thing, like just the identity of a channel or something.
John, can you speak to that?
The proposal right now, well, so first of all, this is phase 2. So right now there's nothing on chain, but phase 2, the proposal is to have channel ID, like a CID.
Okay.
And so like, what does that mean though? Like, what is is it like, it's
Pointing back, I would assume something.
well, the details are
Point back.
TBD, but I presume it'll be a CID with a C name. So your channel ID, your channel name, and then there'll be a host FID that's associated with that CID. And then also a moderator FID. So I think that'll be the minimal set of data that'll be on chain. And
then the casts that are children of that channel will be on hub.
yeah.
So in some ways, it almost kind of reminds me of like DNS records or something like that, where it's like just simple pointers, and that's what's on chain.
Yeah, I think the design's really elegant. Like you said it well, but keeping the protocol as dumb as possible so it can scale, and just having it with likes is really smart, because the entire Farcaster ecosystem already understands likes, all the data infrastructure providers, everybody, and you just reduce messages by a lot. And the other smart thing about it as well is, more messages are going to be spam than are going to be good, right? So if you have a hide, all of a sudden you need to mark, probably 60-70% of messages at scale. And that's a significant load. Whereas if you're just worrying about the good ones, that's much more reasonable.
Okay. That's
So wait
what
a minute.
Dan means
Yeah, that's
when he says hiding doesn't scale, because he's gotten some pushback on that on the feed recently. And he's saying, because that's been, I think, the biggest challenge for channel hosts, which popular channel hosts, all of a sudden now you're seeing in the, what's the feed on the right called? Not
Main.
Recent.
Main.
Recent.
Oh, sorry,
No,
sorry.
recent.
Yeah.
Recent.
So
No,
no,
I'm
I got
pointing
that
to my
wrong.
right.
It's recent, and main is the curated
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the recent feed is now the fire hose, and people are missing the ability to hide. And John, I think that's the point you're saying. And I haven't understood that either, of why like it doesn't scale. It's because it requires an action that costs storage.
So
Well, just the majority of them you're going to want to hide just as the network
Right.
scales. Like
Right.
we're only at 40K DAU right now. I can't remember the recent numbers. And if we're going to get to like 1 million or tens of millions DAU, we're going to get way more spam. Like this is just the beginning. So
This is like email.
So-
like the vast majority of emails that are sent in a
never see.
24-hour period are all like vast majority is spam.
yeah.
So it's
So-
really about filtering and curating, right? So more about focusing on how do we put the good stuff up front and more visible, where the spam or whatever becomes a little less visible and less relevant, where you're not having to go through and hide all of them, but you can elevate. And that's what I'm understanding some of these tools will do as well, is that you can set the rule for anyone who holds this particular token, they're immediately get a like and move into the main feed. Yes? Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's where Hypersub kind of comes in, which is you can, well, what I'm experimenting with is you can pay to have that happen, which I will say is not a good idea on its own.
Okay. All right. So let's actually, I want to do two things. First, let me shift really quick to Alex, and then I want to come back to Johnny to explain that flow and how that's working for what you did in memes.
Mhm.
But first, let me jump back really quick to Airstack, because Airstack has some tools also. So what is Airstack doing for tools? How is it different from Automod? Or are they basically two options of a similar tool?
I think it's kind of like two different options. The flow to get into moderating your channel with Airstack is very similar in terms of, going to your channel, adding our not a bot, which is just another not a kind of play on words. Then you go to Airstack, make sure you're logged in with your wallet, and you look up your F name or Farcaster name, and you can see your channel ownership. And once you get in there, it's kind of this no code, almost like Zapier feeling place where you can just go in and add rules as you go. So it could be any or all, or say like you have to have a certain, you have to have a power badge, or we prefer social capital ranking as like a baseline to cast in the main channel. But then maybe you want to be more specific, and you can add in like POAP ownership and token ownership and balance, greater than, less than rules. And there's like a ton of different options in there. So yeah, I think it's about, offering all these folks that are curating and engaging their communities, a variety of different tools, and help them find what fits best.
So that's like a lot of different ways to elevate sort of hopefully better content, where you're starting to curate and show that rather than worrying about how do I hide all this other stuff. It's like, how do I make sure I see the good things? So again, which I think is a good approach. So Johnny, can you talk through memes and what you had set up previously in the channel, and then how you sort of pivoted to what you're doing now and how that's working?
Yeah. So I was reading this doc and I was like, okay, this is coming. And so, and I
was reading the same doc and going, this is coming, and I have no idea what to do.
Yeah. And so the doc said, I think Dan said something like later this summer or something, we're going to do decentralized channels. And then there's like something about phases. And I was like, okay, cool. There's like plenty of time. And then last week he was like, phase 1 Thursday. And I was like, oh, fuck. And then I was like, this is gonna, like, no one is tracking what's happening here. Like, this is gonna surprise everybody. And then I'm like, why are they doing this? And then I was like, oh, it's because there's no clean way to do it. Like, you have to rip the Band-Aid off. So I was like, okay, fine. So I'm like, I've been bullish on channels since the first channels, like since the NBA channel, Purple, the first experiments of channels. I was like, oh my God, this is the thing. I mean, I remember at FarCon 1, people were telling Dan like channels, it's going to be big. And so, and I've looked at DGen as being like, to me, DGen is like there's so much to learn. That was a channel, and it's a channel that created its own culture, its own token. There are people who made millions of dollars, all that happened from within a channel. So to me, like, that is the canary in the channel coal mine. Like I think that thousands of channels can do what DGen did. And so like, I think this is just a huge design space. And I think the only way that we're going to find out is if we fuck around. And so that's what I'm trying to do with the memes channel. And so I think revenue, in particular recurring revenue, is an important property of like sustainable channels. And so obviously that's what, we're building with Hypersub, is this kind of a general primitive. And
Before
so I'm like,
that though, you had something set up in channels already. Like you had to pay warps, right?
I made a test.
For that.
No,
Right.
just the channel pass?
You sort of did. Yeah. With the
the channel pass.
Right?
Yeah.
Pass.
So
yeah,
that was something that they actually asked me to experiment with. Yeah. Dan was like, we're going to do this channel pass thing to try to cut down on spam. And it's all in warps. Like, will you do this for memes? I was like, okay, what should it be? Like, okay, why don't you try 100 warps? It's $1. Okay.
Now he's a warps millionaire.
Yeah, I am
a trillionaire.
Yeah, I gotta say, if warps ever have an off ramp, I'm retiring. Done. I have so many goddamn warps. No, but
it's interesting to think about how history would have changed if warps were in ERC20.
Yes.
And we're freed from that. Maybe that's
totally
a topic for another time. But
yeah.
I think about this
often. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, it would be. So
he's doing warps to DGen calculations at night
before
he goes to bed.
Yeah. So then they're like, okay, spam is really bad. Why don't you increase the price to 300 warps? I'm like, okay. So I did that, and it basically didn't matter. Like I think the calculation here, and this is especially true when DGen had a multiplier for posting in memes, where people are like, wait a minute, like 300 warps is $3. But the channel has 200,000 something followers. So like, will I pay $300 to get distribution? And even if you say that DAU is 20,000, is that worth $3? Like, yes, it's worth $3. So it didn't really like do much, like it didn't really cut down on spam. But I still think that there's like the reason why with phase 1 of decentralized channels rolling out, why I didn't just abandon it completely is because despite Warpcast saying like, okay, we're done with channel passes, I was like, I want to keep playing with this idea. And so the reason why is because one of the things that I'd wanted to do with warps, once I had more than like a couple thousand, I was like, how do I give these back to people?
Yeah.
Like that's
100 at 10 at a time.
yeah. And it was like,
Great,
oh, we can only
great
tip
meme.
10. I'm like, 10? Like I want to tip like 1,000, And
There's a lot of hosts with this problem, by the way. Design was the same. A lot of channel hosts with hundreds of thousands of warps.
Yeah, you have all these warps just like funneling into literally one person.
The only idea I had was spend as a service. So like, if you want a new channel, I'll buy it because I have warps from the Farcaster channel. And I was like, I'll buy you a channel and you can give me a disc like for a cheaper, or, oh, you want to mint this? I'll mint it and send it to you. I wasn't doing this, but
it's
like
a total hack.
You can think of.
Total hack. Like
Yeah.
So I think that there's this desire for hosts to, I think many hosts recognize, okay, wait, it's my channel. I started it and I'm the most active and I curate it and moderate it. However, it wouldn't be what it is without all the people who contribute to it every day. And so whatever source of revenue is coming in to this really should be distributed amongst us. I think that's like a commonly felt view, but there's no way to do it. And so I'm like, how can I put these Lego blocks together with memes to make this happen? And so I'm like, okay, Automod is a Lego block. Like Paybot and Rounds are Lego blocks. Hypersub is a Lego block for recurring revenue. And so that was the idea. Okay, I'm going to create a memes channel pass. It's a channel subscription. It's 0 for 2069 ETH per year. It's about $16
for the culture.
It has to be. And that money goes into the Hypersub contract. I have a video. It's like a 20-minute video. And I walk through setting it all up. And I'm like, okay, basically what happens is the money goes in the Hypersub contract. And then from there, the recipient address is a splits contract. And then from there, the splits contract basically distributes funds to 6 addresses because I added 2 other co-hosts, which I'm actually going to announce later today.
Oh, good.
And
Yeah,
I'll just announce it right now. I'll announce it on the channel, on the podcast. So it's Bitfloor Ghost, who's like who is like him and I were always like neck and neck on the leaderboard when that was there. And then I'm the dude who also posts funny memes. So basically what I said to them is I was like, hey, look, what I'd like to do is divide the channel revenue 31% and 69%. 69% goes back to top casters. 31% goes to us. And we're going to just divide it evenly. So we're going to divide the 31 between the 3 of us. We each get 10.33. And we're going to divide the 69% tipping pool also between the 3 of us. So we each get 23 or 24, whatever it is. That all happens on chain. It's all observable. It all happens with a splits contract. The situation that we're then all in is we have 2 wallets, our personal wallets, where we get the 10%. And then we have our tipping wallets, which is meme tips 1.eth, meme tips 2.eth, meme tips 3.eth, and so on. And when you see a banger, you install the Paybot cast action. You just click the cast action, click Paybot. The frame comes up. How much do you want to tip? And I'm suggesting that the tipping amount be 0 for 2069, which is the same as an annual.
What are you tipping?
Pass. ETH. Yeah, ETH.
Which is great. ETH.
Yeah, okay. I'm like, because you could imagine. Well, let's make a meme.
ETH and it's tipping within the cast action.
You got it.
That's great.
And it's paying for the year subscription.
You got it. With one banger, one.
That's great.
If you post a second one, you just made $16. If you post the third one, you made $32, and so on and so forth. And so for the top casters in a year, they could, make hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So my joke about this is that it's a transfer of value from the non-dank to the dank.
We're a new sentence.
that's what so okay, but just so this is an experiment, you know. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Maybe this won't work. Like maybe
It's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned.
like
I think it's really interesting. And then you also mentioned rounds, and rounds brings in another approach to distribution of capital and whatever that capital is. So you can have the same kind of thing that you're doing with Paybot, but you're doing it with rounds and putting it into essentially into like escrow, and then the funds get distributed at the end. But the funds are the distribution is based on the interaction with the different casts. So the way rounds works in Purple's doing this right now, and this is out of Nouns and related to Prop House. So essentially, you can set the rules of these are the folks whose likes count, and you can also moderate so that if something comes into that particular round that doesn't fit whatever your parameters are, you can hide those and their likes don't count into the pool. But then the percentage of what you win is based on your likes by whoever those judges are, so to speak. So it can be like, for example, with Purple, it can be only members of the DAO. And some of those, so they're going to be expanding on rounds, I know, coming up. So I'm working more on that.
What's cool, I think, about how I'm approaching this with memes with the other co-hosts that I've added is that I am using my personal tipping allocation to fund the rounds. What Bitfloor Ghost and what I'm the Dude does is up to them. As far as I'm concerned, that is their money that they can allocate to top casters however they want. Paybot, rounds, you know, some other tool for moving value, like it's up to them. And so what I like about this is that it gives us more surface area like to explore, you know, like, because I might be like, hey, this rounds thing is actually like way better, you know, or they may say, I found this other, you know, frame.
There could be another tool next week
or a new tool for sharing value. And that's actually the way to do it. You know, like we can find out. But I think like stepping back, my grand vision is like, you know, and my thesis here is like, can better channel economics result in, like, for example, for memes, can the memes channel on Farcaster become the best place on the internet to find memes? It's a question that I'm like trying to answer.
It's interesting. If you provide
better
the
economics,
does it lead to lead to
because
better
I tell you, I spend a lot of time in the meme mines. I'm out there in the fields farming for memes, and many of the top accounts put PayPal and Cash App and Venmo links in their bio, which is to me a signal that people want to get paid. They want to make money. They're doing work, right? They're providing value. Why shouldn't they? But that feels like a hack. And so, anyway, that's kind of my.
This is really. I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, people talked about, you know, around I think 2021 that most subreddits, most DAOs are kind of like subreddits with shared bank accounts.
Yeah.
You know, what if Reddit was actually naturally on chain, and so. You know, if Farcaster V0 was kind of Twitter on chain, then maybe the next one is going to be Reddit on chain, or even the Discord Redux on chain. Hopefully a better version than that. But I think there's just going to be so many different, with all the Lego blocks that have been built. You have frames, cast actions, and now channels going to come on chain, and you have the whole ecosystem that's now mature. There's a lot more we can do.
It's like, so it's really funny because everything you described, Johnny, was essentially a DAO. But just in a different way, which I mean, welcome to the irony.
Not these two on a DAO panel again.
Here we go. Welcome back. But it's really the essence of a DAO, right? Is shared treasury that those who play a role and contribute to the DAO in whatever way are the ones who determine how those funds are spent. There you go. I just described channel with a hypersub. Right.
Yep.
But I think it's all it is. And just to really bring this home really quick, with Automod and Airstack, I assume that you can limit who can post, cast, etc., interact with based on any NFT. So that would include DAO NFTs as well. Yes.
Yeah, it's
Automod
Automod
and
any
Airstack?
721, 1155, or any ERC20
Yeah.
Okay.
on most of the major networks. Yeah.
Same as here.
And
And
same
then,
with-
you know,
okay.
POAPs and then ERC20 balances as well as like kind of one of those mechanisms.
Okay, so you could even do if they own, for example, FWB is an ERC20 DAO. So they
Yeah.
have a channel that is limited to those who own X number of that ERC20.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I think it's like a ultimate skin in the game gate, right? Like you think about some of these ERC20
Yeah.
communities that people are shilling, but it's like, you know, do they have skin in the game? And if they do, then they can post, you know, if you have this higher balance or whatever it might be, if you want to filter out the real holders from people that are maybe just kind of, you know, shilling.
Right. Or scammers who might be trying to,
Yeah.
send it to a different contract that's completely unrelated. So lots of different safety precautions too that you could take. Adrienne, I'm sorry, I cut you off earlier. What were you going to say?
No,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to say, Johnny, I just love the experimentation, and just I personally kind of always have this like anti-financialization bias of like, let's do that later. Like, and, you know, like focus on the content curation. And I actually think I may be changing my mind a little bit, which in the, you know, in the Web 2 world, who you have such a kind of, is it right skewed, like only the top creators really get paid, and most people don't. And if you want to get paid, it's kind of like just build. You have to grow the following, and like money comes later typically. So I think if we want to try to make it a more equitable internet, it probably does mean like don't wait to financialize maybe, or don't wait to experiment. So I just like hearing the way you talk about it, because I want to encourage maybe channel hosts, like maybe don't, I mean, it doesn't mean you need to go and put paywalls in front of everything or kind of like, but just experiment. And it's like the earlier you do it, probably the easier it will be to find out kind of how to do it then later.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like the way I see this is that we're all, it's almost like this like evolutionary process where we're all like each channel is its own kind of mutation, and we're seeing like, okay, which one like leads to fitness, like which one has like the best community and like the best content, and why, you know, what are the causal mechanisms of that outcome so that others can then replicate it and the network can grow. Go ahead.
Totally. And then just going back to kind of our favorite line, which is Farcaster requires proof of work, which I think a lot of people, you know, if you're kind of new, you're waiting for the playbook. It's like, all right, someone else go figure out how to make money and then give me the playbook, which is fine. You can wait for that, but you'll be waiting versus I just want to encourage people just to kind of fuck around.
Yeah, same.
It's just, who knows, like there is no playbook. So just there are tooling, and there won't be this like very elegant, you have a video, but people should try to play around and
I think the other thing to keep in mind, and you know, we're all Farcaster maxis on this podcast, and there are many on the network, but you know, the reality is that Farcaster's success is far from certain. And so like as sort of diehard, you know, network participants and members of this community, we really have nothing to lose. So my feeling is like, do not be precious about it. I don't give a fuck about how many followers I have or how many followers the channel has, because we're a tiny little speck in like an ocean of social networks. And so like, we should absolutely be like pushing the envelope and doing these experiments. And like, my feeling is like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I'll be honest about that. I'll write up a Notion doc and say, okay, you know, this is how it went, and this didn't work, and here's what I learned, and whatever. And then hopefully someone else can use that for the kind of the next iteration. And over time, we hopefully figure out what does work, and then that's what causes the network to grow. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that like, you know, we are on the frontier, and so we should act like it. And so we should not be safe and conservative. We should be like pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And so that's what, to me, is the most exciting thing about decentralized channels, is that we now have all these other building blocks, these other interoperable building blocks, like because Hypersub is on chain, because you have all these ERC20 tokens on chain, because you have things like Automod, which is like reading what's on chain. It's like, okay, cool. Now we're not all gated on what the Merkle team, in particularly like what Dan decides to ship. We can we have now agency and autonomy over what we can do with these things. So to me, that's like the most exciting thing here.
I agree. And I think that also the experimentation, we see this all over Web3. So for me, like the only way we figure out what works with DAOs is to have thousands of DAOs and then figure out what works and doesn't work. It's the same kind of thing. And until you have these things on L2s, I think this plays a huge role as well. You couldn't do a lot of stuff. So it's like every little step gets us closer to figuring out what actually does work in terms of future, businesses, future, whatever, of everything online. So I think that's, everything's an experiment. So don't be afraid. Adrienne, what were you going to say?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I think that I think one of the challenges, and Johnny, you're kind of, and like you said, we're all maxis. This is like where we spend a lot of channel hosts are doing this. It's like they're completely off the side, and it's not their day job. They may not be building on Farcaster. It's like, oh, here's a community. I built a channel. And then all of a sudden Bandit gets ripped off. And now I've got spam. I don't know how to hide things. People feel lost. I mean, this goes back to the Nixlo cast that from the beginning, which is like, okay, what do I do now? Because
what do I do? Yeah.
So I don't know. And I don't know if I interrupted you, Johnny, or Prof, you wanted to go somewhere else, but maybe do we want to go towards just kind of like talking to the channel, like the person who's hosting a channel, what tools do they have? How, like from a moderation curation perspective? And
maybe we can go to each of you to just kind of talk about, if you're brand new, you're just looking at, okay, what do I do? Where do they start with each of these tools for whatever they're building, and what's going to work best in their instance? I think that's a great idea.
My recommendation is to, if you used Workcast's features, then my recommendation would be to install Automod as a moderator and install the hide, curate, the hide and curate cast actions, which is essentially going to get you back to where you were, but with just a different set of tools. And I would just start there. And that way you're kind of like back at baseline. And then from there, you can start to experiment with adding more rules. I mean, like I feel bad. I like DM John almost every day. And I'm like, why is this happening? Like, how do these rules work together? And so it's like,
does he DM you back?
Yes. Yeah. Which also makes me feel bad. but
John,
like
what worked for Ted is if you just put in your username, don't DM me.
Yeah. John's going to have to do that soon. But like
after this, John's going to change his profile.
Wait, John, how does the hide work? Does it just because I understood it was like, there's no such thing as hiding anymore. So the only thing you can do is like, so does the hide just override any likes?
It removes the like.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
and if you have multiple co-hosts, like let's say we're all co-moderating and 3 of you like something and I go and hide it.
Channel.
Yeah. Does the hide...
So if you have like 10 co-hosts, if a co-host says, curate, it's just Automod that likes it. So if any other co-host says hide it, it's just Automod that unlikes it. And that's the only thing that matters from the perspective of clients of Warpcast. So
you can go and you can check co-host alignment by looking at the Automod logs. And you'd be like, okay, Prof funny. Liked it, Adrienne hit it, Prof re-curated, and then
it's just like it's a DAO disaster. Like I can already I know one channel that we will not be trying to coordinate that. That's going to be
someone casted recently like, why is Automod liking all my casts?
We're your biggest fan.
Yeah. So I think an important point here is that liking, just to like put a bullet on this, liking is the way in which it curates and moves it to the main feed for those who may not fully understand that. So if the moderator or owner likes it, then it moves it to the main feed. Or just the moderator. Okay. So if you turn moderator on, that's what's moving it to the main feed. So that's the important part here. If it's not liked, then it doesn't have that curation, and it won't be. But it'll still be in recent, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, everything's
But
in
maybe
recent.
hidden.
I've
Okay.
heard someone refer to the recent tab as the spam tab of death.
Yeah.
Another way to think about it is
Depending on the channel, it might be. Yeah.
it's just a fire hose. It's
I
just a
really like
fire
the
hose.
idea of recent because there, one of the things that come up a lot before was like, hey, my casts aren't showing up. Like I cast in this channel. Did Automod hide it? Did a mod hide it? Whatever. So I'd like to see, I think recent is too much spam right now, but I think maybe a couple more iterations, if that could be a place where everyone's cast could be seen, I think that's a positive thing to have. So I
agree. I also think that it very clearly demonstrates the value of curation, because if you think, I think there's this like stated versus revealed preference thing where people are like, I want to see everything, I'm against censorship. Show me everything. It's like, oh, really? Okay, great. Here you go. Here it is.
I'm pro censorship. I just saw this.
It's like, you know what? I'm pro. I'm pro
changed my mind.
curation.
So-
and if the owner of this channel wants to apply some rules and, on top of those rules, do some heuristic curation, yes, give me that.
Yeah.
And so my feeling on that is that the channels that get curation right will be the winning channels, because they're gonna have the best stuff. They're gonna have the best the best content. They're gonna be the best little cozy corners to hang out in.
Yeah, I think there's go ahead, Adrienne.
No, go ahead, John.
I think there's opportunities as well on the moderation side. So we talk a little, like token gating is kind of, a heuristic for, it can help bootstrap a channel economy, but it's also a heuristic for getting the right people into the curation channel in an automatic way. But there's lots of other ones, I think. If the way I think about each channel is it's kind of its own little culture. If you take a Phil's commitment channel, very simple one, you have to start with I commit, and you're declaring commitments publicly. And there's other ones like Ham that are tipping like crazy. And basically you can imagine each of these having their own little fine-tuned models that you could use to actually take a lot of the burden away from manually curating this stuff. And you can start to create culture in channels. And for me, one really big KPI, I think, for Warpcast is, or for Farcaster, and for me personally, is how many new relationships could be made inside of a channel. And I think if you can start to have a culture where there's not a lot of spam, where things are more on topic and people can connect, that's a really good sign. So it's something I'm thinking a lot about.
Yeah.
And bring it back to that network. Yeah, the network perspective rather than media. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
No, I was just going to say, to add on to that, I think a lot of channels are testing things out right now across, both our tools and figuring out what works. And I think being able to have that boilerplate, basic filter that pushes, people that are real people into your main, and then finding what are those little logic points that engage your community across different things, whether they're doing RL events or maybe they're using receipts, and it's a fitness channel. How do you engage and motivate people to want to push content that would be valuable and be curated into the main feed?
Awesome.
I think I really like what John said. I mean, I think about, I often think about what caused Farcaster to get to where it is. And so I think a lot about the first 6 months that I was there, and it was so cozy. It was so aligned, and my joke about this is in the Romerga rhythm we trust, which is Dan was cherry picking from Twitter who he thought would be the, good people who would show up and contribute to the culture that was emerging. And to me, that has to you have to make that fractal. You have to replicate that, a million times in order for the network to really grow. And I think channels are absolutely how you do that. Channels are this porous boundary that you can be okay, this is what we're about here. And so and so people can come in and they can leave. But there is a defining culture. It's this channel's culture is different from another channel's culture. And so the new user would show up and be okay, who do I vibe with? What makes sense to me? Do I want to be part of like commitment culture, you know, or do I want to go full degen, or do I want a little bit of both? Like I think like channels have to mature to a point where the culture is obvious, like right away for new users joining, and they can be like, they can kind of peek in, they can like kind of pop their head in the door and be like, oh, this is cool. Like, I really like this. I want to be a part of this. And then they can, and there's like a really smooth onboarding on like a per channel basis. Like, I think that, but in order for that to be true, we have to do what we're doing right now, which is we have to be on this frontier of iterating and experimenting. And I think what's, you know, this is just true with any learning process, is that it's painful. You know, you go through periods where you're like, what? I'm so confused. This doesn't make sense. Like, this feels kind of broken. Like, but that's like, you have to get through that to get to the thing on the other side, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that I know for me, I haven't done this yet. And I think this was more of a like, well, I knew you guys were coming, so I'll just wait a minute. I haven't done any of my channels yet, moderated them. And I'm going to try all the different options because I have very different channels. So I want to go play around and actually learn, you know, what are the big differences between Airstack and Automod, and if I turn this rule on and if I turn this rule off, and play around with that. Because we've got, you know, I've got DAO channels that I have, and then I have, you know, GM Farcaster, which is more, you know, just sharing what we're doing here in that community, and that has a Hypersub. So how do I elevate those folks within that channel? It's going to be an interesting sort of, let's test out all the things and see if we can, you know, learn anything from doing things differently. And I would suggest, like, if you have multiple channels, do the same, to see if we can have some learning around what works well and what doesn't. It's so that we can share those with each other. So, what else, Adrienne, before we wrap, I'm going to want to be conscious of time here. So what did we miss? We didn't get to.
Question for John and Alex, and I think I know the answer, but so Airstack is an option, Automod's an option. Are they necessarily mutually exclusive? The way things are set up today in terms of tooling, it's kind of for a channel, it's one or the other because they're acting as the curation or moderator. Yeah. Okay.
Because you can only have one moderator for the channel, so that the moderator becomes the tool. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like the simple answer, the simple answer is yes. But there is a future where channels can bring their own moderator, and they could integrate. They could basically bring their own bot to services like Automod or Airstack, and compose those. Now, in the case of Automod and Airstack, the functionality is overlapping, so it doesn't make sense. But there might be other things that you could compose with other tools in the future. So there's a path for that, which is kind of cool.
It would be cool, even as like potentially in that future where we build a, you know, maybe differing tool sets to take, like, you know, maybe like social capital rank from Airstack, and there's an Automod feature that you like as well. Like, that would be a really cool kind of composable future where, you know, maybe you want a deeper level of curation.
Is there an archetype of a channel or someone you're specifically targeting, Alex or John, in terms of like who you're trying to reach, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Airstack, we've just, you know, in the last couple of months, we've really gone all in on Farcaster. We really, really believe in building tools for builders here, and channel moderators fall under that category. So for us, it's like basically anyone with a channel, you know, we want to help you through a suite of, you know, cast actions, through no code tools, no code frames, and then through like moderation tooling as well. So yeah, kind of any and all as we continue to kind of ship more Farcaster tooling.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like we're pretty early in discovering use cases. I think that, you know, the bigger channels have a lot to gain because they just have way more volume, so they need automation. Or their moderation task is just way too big. But then there's smaller channels that I think are really cool. Like, I mean, I love the example from Phil with commitment. Like that, every post in there is a commitment. Lesson in there is the same. Every post and lesson in there is a lesson. And there's a whole bunch of other ones.
I do have one more question. And do you both have free option, like free tiers? Are you people paying right away? How does that work? And John, I loved when someone pointed out, I think, was it you, that all of a sudden you have to pay for store, like when Automod bot is doing all the likes, you're going to be having to up your storage costs, which did not think about
Yeah,
that.
so
That was maybe
that's why I was up 24 hours the day before. I was provisioning 40 accounts on my phone for Automod to actually provision storage. 'Cause
And
I have-
that's
I have
why
to
there's
shard
multiple
storage.
bots when it was like, because I
Yeah.
added this and it was like different bots because of too many likes. Fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can just get like one massive account and do it that way as well. But more of a technical
Oh, that's
conversation. But yeah, there's about 40 different Automod accounts now.
Oh, wow.
And,
All
and
right. Interesting.
yeah, and Airstack at current, we're completely free. We're still kind of in discovery mode, talking to a lot of folks and iterating on the product. So yeah, for the time being, no cost.
Yeah, Automod has a free tier
To be early.
right now up to 1,000 casts, and then it's $7 for the next tier, and then it goes like 24 from above from that. So
On
kind of
Hypersub,
relating to the storage aspects. What was that,
You-
Johnny? Sorry.
you actually can pay for Automod with Hypersub,
yeah,
which is kind of
Well, that's
funny.
right.
It gets like
yeah,
recursive.
there's a revenue share also. There's a 5% revenue share with Hypersub and invite links. So it's all powered
Ooh.
by that. So
Right. Monetize your channel through
Good to know.
Hypersub. Use Hypersub to pay for
Pay
your
for Automod. There
mod
you go.
tools.
I am that meme right now.
Yeah. It's the Spider-Man
Charlie?
meme where we're all.
Oh, that one.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it's so many. This has been amazing though. Thank you for this conversation. Is there anything else that you want to shout out? And we're going to have links to everything in the show notes. So we'll have links to Automod and Airstack and the Airstack Notion and Hypersub to make sure you can find all these different options, as well as more information about the decentralized channels that Dan has put out there as well. Anything else that you want to sort of leave with that we either missed or something you want to highlight that before we wrap?
Maybe just quickly, if you're testing our tool out, jump in our dev chat, tell us what you want, what you like, don't like. Like we're, fully driven on building a really great moderation tool here, and just want people's, feedback so we can make sure we're aiming in the right direction.
Great. And
I would just add, if you have feedback, suggestions, comments, would love to hear it. As I mentioned multiple times, like it's a big experiment. And so the most valuable thing is information. So if there's ideas or points of friction or whatever, I'm very hungry for that because I want this to work. So yeah, that's what I'd love.
awesome.
Any input there.
And you had a group chat too for those who might be interested in seeing how all these things work together.
That's right.
So we'll have that link to that cast as well if you're interested in jumping in, or just reach out to Johnny for that. And John, lastly, anything that you want to shout out?
Oh man, thanks to Warpcast core team for not shutting me off like 3 months ago when I reverse engineered the APIs and released this. And actually for taking a pretty big bet on moderation. I mean, we have a moderator in Warpcast now, like that's going to be potentially in the protocol. So it's a pretty big bet on the ecosystem. That's something that they could have just owned or not exposed. So it's pretty cool. And last, just
that's a great point.
Automod,
and I think now they're just pointing to you. Of like, oh, we don't have to build that now. These folks already did. So they just keep like pointing to those who've built the thing, and that makes their job just a little bit easier. So that's pretty cool.
I think everyone will win from it because we'll just get a nice ecosystem of tools, and channel owners can do what they need. So
amazing. Adrienne, anything else that you want to wrap with before we call it?
A reminder that this is Tuesday, last Thursday. We ripped a Band-Aid and changes came out less than a week. This content will be out of date in about 24 to 48 hours because
absolutely.
So hopefully this was helpful, but
actually, you know what? I just checked. It's out of date already.
Yeah, I saw that.
We'll record something tomorrow again.
Yeah.
Just expect evolution. And also I want to ask if anyone can guess what my background is. So if you know.
I don't even know. What is your background?
Anyone in
no
the
idea.
chat? Okay, it's from I Speak Nerd's essay on channel curation that he just put out. So shout out, thank you for doing that. So,
and we'll have that
Yeah,
in
go
the
read
show
that. It was
notes
good.
as well. That was a really helpful one. So we'll have all these different links in the show notes. I didn't recognize it from the essay, but now I see it. Very cool. And speaking of I Speak Nerd and tabletop, I think that is primed for an interesting economic benefit channel. So we'll see what they do there, but I definitely see things coming from channels like that. So all right. And with that, thank you all for joining us today. This was super helpful. I think it clarified a few things for me. I need to go do some work.
Make money?
Add some moderating.
Do some work.
No. But I have to go add some tools to my various channels. And with that, we will be back on Friday. We'll be off the next couple of days. I will be probably streaming a little bit or posting some content from Consensus, and a lot of fun things happening there. And but otherwise, we will see you Friday with a little recap of all the things back at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll see you then. And with that, bye-bye.
Thank you.